Hi, I'm Harry. Today's video is the first in a series of videos that I'm doing. The series is called Life and Business Lessons From, and today we're looking at Dana White.
Senators and lots of other people that are terrified of the internet.
What would we be scared of? We work on the internet. What would we be scared of?
You're scared of the
people?
Of the people. You're absolutely afraid.
But based on what?
Of the people. Don't play games. You know you are. You are, and all the other guys that were standing here today are terrified of the internet. I'm not. I'm not afraid of the internet. It's a place where cowards live.
For those of you who don't know, Dana White is the president of the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is the flagship organization within mixed martial arts. Now, you may not have any interest whatsoever in mixed martial arts or combat sports in general, and that doesn't matter because you can still learn a lot from some of the things we're going to talk about with regards to the life and business practices of Dana White. Some quick facts about Dana White from a business perspective. He's got a net worth of around $500 million, and he brokered the deal for buying the UFC in the first place for $2 million back in 2001. And then in 2013, he was responsible largely for the company being sold for $4.1 billion. And with Dana White retaining his status as the president of the UFC since then has gone on to estimate a value at around $7 billion. So essentially, he was a massive part of buying the UFC in 2001 for $2 million. And now in 2020, UFC is worth around $7 billion. Now that's quite a transformation. We're going to talk about some of the steps that took place during that time. So in Dana White's younger life, I believe he was born in Connecticut in the USA, he turned his back on college. I think he went twice, from my research, he went twice to two separate colleges, and he left after the first semester or first term in both cases. He was very clear that he was not interested in going to college. Now, what can we learn from that? Well, Dana White often talks about his absolute conviction that he wanted to be in the boxing world. If you're Dana White, who's absolutely convinced and passionate about being in the boxing world, going to college and ending up in massive amounts of student debt wouldn't necessarily serve you that well anyway. So from that perspective and his particular situation, it is quite a wise thing to do to not spend that money and instead invest that time and energy and money into furthering his knowledge of the boxing game, which is pretty much what he did. It's a very interesting point that he knew exactly what he wanted to do. As I've talked about in recent videos, often people don't know. And having listened to some talks with him, he's very adamant that he's aware that a lot of people don't know, and he feels lucky or blessed that he has had that awareness from a young age and the ability and the courage to follow his passion. He did boxercise classes and things in Connecticut and was essentially a trainer for boxing, but then he also went into management, and he also interned for a boxer and just did loads of free stuff for him to learn the game inside out. A big turning point in his life was when he got in trouble with owing some gangsters money. I think it was Whitey Bulger and his crew, who they've actually made movies about. One of Whitey Bulger's henchmen came to Dana White and said, if you don't get us the $2,500 by tomorrow at 1 p.m, you're not going to like the consequences. So Dana White booked a ticket to Las Vegas and got out of Dodge very wisely. And one thing you've got to consider there is that there's such confidence, such assurance in what he's doing. Now, a lot of people may have and ahed about, do I want to leave my family? Do I want to leave my friends? Do I want to leave this? He was just like, no, I'm going to get in trouble with these guys. I'm just going to get out of here. And that's what he did. And Las Vegas is the perfect place to go because there's loads of boxers that's out there, and the boxing game kind of revolves around Las Vegas and the casinos. Dana White then went on to be in Las Vegas, a manager to some mixed martial arts fighters. Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, I believe, were two of them. So he got to a position where he was managing some top stars within the MMA arena. However, MMA was not what it is now, and it was really a fledgling sport with very minimal attention placed upon it. Due to his interactions in that market, he got to realize that the owners of the UFC at the time were really struggling and were looking to sell. Let's backtrack a little bit. When Dana White moved out to Las Vegas, he went to a friend's wedding, and at that friend's wedding, he met Lorenzo Fertitta. Now, Lorenzo Fertitta was already a friend of his from school, but they'd not been in touch for a while. And some people may say, Dana White was lucky because he managed to meet money men, you know? I mean, I might not be able to meet money men and all this stuff, but if you look at the trend of his life, he's very good at just following his convictions, you know, really just pushing through. He knows he wants to be in combat sports, so he goes to combat sports. He knows he doesn't want to go to college, so he stays away from college. He doesn't waste his time there and doesn't do as he's told. He has this kind of energy about him and this drive that's very interesting. I do actually follow the UFC quite keenly. I'm a fan of this sport, and therefore I hear a lot of interviews with Dana White, and he is an impressive individual. Although I don't agree with his politics and several other things that he's done, we're trying to keep these videos very positive and just take the positives that we can out of people, and there's a lot of positive qualities to take from Dana White, hence why I've made this video. Let's go back to that struggling owner of the UFC. So he sold it to Dana White and the Fertitta brothers for $2 million. Dana White's gone on to say that they were trying to stave off bankruptcy, the original owners were. So they'd stripped the UFC of its assets. They literally had the rights to the name the UFC and an octagon. That's literally it. And for those of you who don't know, an octagon is the ring in which these fights take place, which is very original to the UFC. Dana White also explained that the assets were stripped so much that they didn't even own the rights to the website, UFC.com, and that was owned by somebody else because they'd sold it. The reason I'm saying that is it gives you a picture of how much work they had to do. They literally built this from nothing, and when I say they, I mean the Fertittas backed Dana with the money, but Dana put in all the effort to get it to where it is today. But by no means I'm not belittling what the Fertittas did, and I'm going to get onto that in a second. After a few years in the game, in the business of trying to build a UFC, the Fertittas rang Dana White and said, look, we're 40 million in debt. We need you to try and find a buyer to see what we could sell the UFC for now. And Dana White obviously was a bit shocked and perturbed because he's putting his whole life's work in it, but obviously he understands and he feels the pressure of being $40 million in the hole, especially when it's his friend's money. So he went out and duly looked for buyers, and the maximum he could potentially get was between $6 and $7 million. So he rang Lorenzo back and told him this, and Lorenzo slept on it, and he told him the next day, let's just keep doing it, let's keep going. That there is interesting. So it doesn't matter how rich you are, you know, a certain amount of money is going to hurt, and that amount of money was hurting Lorenzo and his brother. Yet, even though they had that pain point, they still persevered. And the most likely reason why they persevered is because they believed in the project. Now, your mind might be telling you something, and your body might be telling you something, and your friends around you might be telling you something. But in your gut, in your heart, if you know that this is going to happen and this may work, and you've got a good feeling, good vibe about it deep down. And also, if you've got someone in the position of power that you really trust, like they had with Dana White being the president, then you've just got to stick to your instincts and keep going, which is what they did. And they got duly rewarded for that. And just a quick figure, their gross revenue went up to $600 million in 2015. So it's an extremely successful business. Since then, they've got a contract with ESPN in America, and they're earning plenty of money from that. Dana White is admired and also ridiculed quite a lot in the fight game because he has almost ruled with an iron fist. He tells people, you fight this person. If you lose 4 fights in a row, you're very likely to get cut from the UFC. It's a brutal industry, but he makes no bones about it. Even recently, he said that he doesn't think that people should look at the UFC or fighting in the UFC as a valid career, because it can be over at any moment because the sport is that brutal on people's bodies.
This isn't a career. This is not a career. This is an opportunity. Anything can happen at any given moment. Knee can blow out. You're back. You're this. You're that. COVID-19. You know, who the hell knows what is coming down the pipeline? So you have to take every opportunity that you can get.
And then we come to 2020. I always admired Dana White, but what he did in 2020 in the midst of the lockdown was especially standout. It was something that was different, and it was something that I was kind of taken aback by. But he has this energy of just making things happen in situations where you feel like the world's falling apart. And what I'm getting at is he's been putting on UFC events every weekend. As I'm recording, the first Fight Island fight is this evening, tonight. All over the place, you've got people folding. You've got sports organizations trying to halve the salaries of their players and staff, and they're trying to make cuts left, right and center because they know they're not earning the money through the gate receipts and through they having to give money back to sponsors, etc. The UFC under Dana White's stewardship have not cut the salaries of any of their employees, and fighters only get paid if they fight, and this is their livelihood. So him being able to put on the events for these guys means that they can feed their families. Literally, this is literally the case.
No, I know how hard this is. Believe me. I told you, you guys, most of you have known me for a very long time. Whether you like me, you hate me, you don't agree with me, you agree with me. When I come out and tell you something's the hardest thing that I've ever done, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And you know, there were a lot of powerful forces battling against us for it not to happen. And I don't wish that on anybody. I know everybody, you know, thinks that I hate all these. I don't hate all these other groups. All these other groups need to survive for this thing to work for everybody. And people getting laid off and losing their jobs, and no, I don't wish that on anybody ever.
When you look at the environment, even a couple of months ago, people were super scared of the cause of the pandemic, and they were very anxious. But he did rigorous testing. He was the first to move. Originally, he was going to do some fights at the Native American casino in California, or one of them. And he was so close to making it happen. And they had agreed and everything else. But then the governor put pressure on Disney, who own ESPN, who are the people who are the TV broadcasters. And apparently some high-level people from Disney actually rang Dana White and told him to back down. Even in the face of that, though, he found another place to do it. He went to Florida and he did it there. And he made it happen, and he tried his best. And he just brings this energy, he brings this vibe. It's so admirable that he just makes things happen. He's like a force of nature. And I'll input some clips of him dealing with journalists, and you'll see that he comes across almost aggressive, but he's just got this conviction about him that I do admire. And it's something we can all learn from, is to trust ourselves more. I mean, when you look at Dana White, that guy, he doesn't seem to doubt himself at all. And I'm sure he has his moments where he does internally and in private, but this guy just generally just seems to stick to his guns and make things happen. And that's something we can all learn from. When the door is shut by an exec, you make it happen anyway. When they say no in one place, you go to another place and make it happen anyway. And the fighters love him for helping them get paid. But also there are some issues coming up where fighters feel they're being underpaid at the minute.
He feels that he doesn't owe the fans an apology. Yet I'm apologizing. I didn't go in and fight like a jackass for 5 rounds. I didn't do what he did tonight. We went out and we made them a crazy offer to come into the UFC and prove that he was the best in the world. And they turned it down. Nobody in their right mind would have turned that deal down.
He was very upset about the decision, so I went in to talk to him about it.
I'm mad. I'm acting like I'm angry.
Yeah.
That's all I'm acting like. A psycho is how Lee acts.
Somebody who says like, no, Dana, I don't need a pep talk.
I don't need one. I don't need a pep talk. And you don't really have any
I'm not
right
here to give you a
Then why are you
talk.
yelling at me? You don't have any right to yell at me, Dana.
You know, Bobby, then I don't want to talk. Disrespect me. Have I ever disrespected you?
I didn't disrespect you.
Yeah, you did.
I talked to you with respect the
I don't
whole time.
want pep talk. That's not disrespectful?
It
Have
isn't
I ever
disrespectful.
disrespected you?
Disrespectful would be telling you, get the out of here, Dana.
Have
That
I
would be
ever
disrespectful.
disrespected
Don't
you?
you agree with me?
No, I disagree with you.
You haven't disrespected me until now.
So why the are you going to talk to me like that? I don't give a if you're mad or not. You're not going to disrespect me.
The way I'd summarise what we can learn from Dana White is based upon his life and his business strategies and what he's done. I mean, if you can say you're the president of an organisation that you brokered the deal to get that organisation bought in 2001 for $2 million, and you sell that, and he had a 10% stake, that's part of the reason why he's worth $500 million. He had a 10% stake, so when it got sold, he got $400 million in 2013, I believe it was. Those figures just speak for themselves and they give him credibility. But even if you just look at the way he talks, the way he makes things happen, like this Fight Island thing he's doing in Abu Dhabi, it is mad. They have to do a quarantine in hubs in the areas of the countries that these fighters are originally from. They have to get tested there, stay in quarantine in a hotel room. Then they have to fly on a UFC plane with just UFC people who've been tested on an Etihad flight, I believe. Then they go, get tested again, stay in their hotel rooms in Abu Dhabi, and then stay in quarantine again. And then you've just got to have this pool of people that have been tested that are ready to roll. And then you have to deal with issues when people test positive or they have an issue and be able to think on their feet. I think another important thing is that Dana White is the leader of this organization. So he'll have built a team from the ground up, because he was the only guy there at the start. He will have built a team from the ground up that can execute and just move and execute and deal with different issues. People may ask, why is he so insistent on putting on these events? I think part of it is his ego, like he's taken an actual disliking to being told no. But actually another part of it is genius, because there's no other major sports in that arena on. You know, the only thing is boxing's not really on, and he's putting on the fights at the top end of the spectrum with the top guys, with world champions fighting one another. What he's doing is he is winning fans, and he knows it. And he knows that the fans that he wins during this pandemic period, during this lockdown period, won't leave, because once they're exposed to this sport, once they're exposed to the characters within this sport who are not neutered like they are in soccer/football, American football, basketball, they don't say controversial things often. But UFC fighters are madmen, a lot of them. And when you're getting in a ring and fighting another man or a woman, it's interesting when you go into these things and you go into this kind of world where you used to think it was almost brutal, but then you start to appreciate the skill set and the technicality involved in this stuff. So I'm going to do a fair bit of content around the UFC, and I think the next business/life lessons series video I'm going to do is going to be about one Conor McGregor, because Conor McGregor's got a very interesting life story as well, and I feel like we can learn from other people's success stories. We can be inspired, we can learn, and we can hopefully take little lessons, take little gems from them and their lives, and take those positives out of each person and then bring it into our own. And what I'm trying to do here is not focus on the negatives. There obviously are negatives with every human being in every situation, with their political or their individual or social belief systems and what they subscribe to, etc. But that's not what I'm addressing here. I'm trying to take the gems from different avenues of people, and then so that not only can I learn, but then you guys watching can also benefit as well. So I hope you found this useful. It wasn't a deep dive into Dana White and the UFC, but it was a bit of information a lot of you may not know. I think one thing here to note as well is that there's a reason I'm attracted to people like Dana White and the UFC fighters, is because there's a degree of authenticity that you just don't get with a lot of other sports people, because they get massacred if they said half of the things that these guys say and they get away with. So it's just incredible watching the sport, and it has its negatives, it definitely does, but it is also undeniably fascinating. Let me know if you liked the video. Like, share, subscribe, because it really helps us out and helps us grow as a relatively new and fresh channel. Thank you for your time, and see you on the next one.
Let's not forget that Ken Shamrock tried to sue us. That he said that his contract, Ken Shamrock owes me $175,000. And I'm coming for it, Ken.